Back in 2003, I gave a sermonette about how words can be destructive. As members of God's church, when negative and damaging words come our way, our goal should be to ignore or deflect the insults or any abuses, because it is far wiser than trying to battle each slight made against us. And the focus of that sermonette then was how we react to hurtful words. I began that sermonette by saying, as children, we often hear the saying, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me." And I'm sure that most all of you have heard that idiom, especially during your childhood. This simple phrase was often expressed to children in order to help them to learn to deal with verbal attacks, those unpleasant words spoken to them or about them, and let them know that they couldn't hurt them because only physical things could hurt them, like broken bones. And when we were children, the phrase may have been very effective, because kids have that ability that they can be fighting at one moment and then playing together the next. But as we grow older, I believe this phrase loses its meaning. And I believe sincerely that words do hurt. So we need to always consider the pain caused by the things that we say, because the pain that comes through the words that we say to each other can linger long past the healing time of any cut or broken bone. Harsh words can have serious and lasting emotional effects because they are often judgmental, subjective, one-sided. They can perpetuate negativity, resentment, distrust. Bullying is a big deal in schools today, which can be very difficult for some children. And we may have no idea the pain caused by this, because we may never know it. But some of these scars, these invisible scars, may never go away. And some people may even carry them around the rest of their lives. Everyone is made up differently, of course. Some may be able to shrug off things that are said to them very, very easily. But for others, the memory of painful words can lead to a lifetime of anxiety, stress, anger, resentment, fear, depression, and could even affect a person's mental health. We must never underestimate the power of our words and the impact of the spoken word. This is especially true when it is an adult, a parent, maybe even a school teacher speaking to a child. How often this offhanded thing they might say, "Well, you're just stupid," or "You're worthless," and not even knowing that you might be destroying or harming the self-esteem of that child. And that child may doubt themselves for many years to come because they believed what they heard. Now, thinking on that, last night, I have to admit, I texted my children and I asked them the question, has anything ever lingered with you that I've said when you were smaller? And then I patiently waited. And thankfully, they both answered me no. But the point is, our words matter. The question is, are the words that we use harmful, or are they going to be helpful? Because our words have such an impact on people, the scriptures makes it clear that we will be held accountable for the words that we say. Sometimes even the tone and the volume in which we deliver words can communicate love or hate. As we see in the scriptures, God has a lot to say about this subject, about how we speak to others, and how God feels about destructive language. Our words matter. The question is, do we see it? Do we acknowledge it? You see, Harmful words, they can separate, they can destroy. One negative statement can negate thousands of kind and thoughtful words that one person might have said. So it's important for us to consider our words, both positive and negative, and consider how those words will affect others and ourselves before we actually say them. Do you recognize that it is important to God of what we say and how we conduct our lives? Because our speech is so important to God and how much it matters to Him. The Bible is full of instruction on this subject, and God makes it clear what He expects of us. Now, Proverbs is full of wisdom on this point, and I'm going to get there. But I'm going to start in James today. And James has a lot to say about our speech, and I'm only going to read a few scriptures here. But it's almost like the Proverbs of the New Testament. So please turn to James chapter 3. I'm going to start with verse 1. James chapter 3 and verse 1. James begins the verse saying, "My brethren, let not many of you become teachers, knowing that we shall receive a stricter judgment." Now, me stand here, the first thing I say is, whoa. Judgment is particularly stricter on teachers of God's way, including those who consider themselves teachers. Given the responsibility associated with it, you do not want to misrepresent God or His teachings, because again, we will be held to a higher standing. This is a serious matter for us. And He holds us, again, to a strict account. You may wonder sometimes why some of the men look very nervous up here. I've thought about this. And I even, especially started out, have the butterflies, the nervousness. And I think partly it's because we understand the weight of the words that we speak. Even John Reitenbaugh used to talk about he always had butterflies right before he would speak. So none of us are immune. James 3, verses 2 through 5. Because he says, "For we all stumble in many things. If anyone does not stumble in word, he is a perfect man, able to bridle the whole body. Indeed, we put bits in horses' mouths that they may obey us and turn their whole body. Look also at the ships. Although they are large and are driven by fierce winds, they are turned by a very little rudder wherever the pilot desires. Even so, the tongue is a little member and boasts great things." Brethren, again, words have power. James is saying, though, every one of us, from time to time, will say the wrong thing. Yes, there will be times that we struggle. Maybe we get frustrated. Maybe our emotions take over and explode. And we will say things that we regret. But after it comes out, there may be instant regret, but there's nothing we can do about it. We may wish we could pull those words back, but of course that is impossible. And those words also may have a lifetime of consequences. And so, again, we must always need to consider the impact of our statements on the hearer. It may even, again, include the tone of our voice and how we say something. But our goal should always be to never diminish God's love and His character, because we as His church represent Him. Please turn to Proverbs chapter 6. Proverbs chapter 6, and I want to start reading in verse 12. The caption above this area says, "The wicked man." Verse 12, "A worthless person, a wicked man, walks with a perverse mouth. He winks with his eyes. He shuffles his feet. He points with the fingers. Perversity is in his heart. He devises evil continually. He sows discord. Therefore his calamity shall come suddenly. Suddenly he shall be broken without remedy. And then the next few verses are very well known. Verse 16, these 6 things the Lord hates. Yes, 7 are an abomination to him. A proud look, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that deceives, that devises wicked plans, feet that are swift in running to evil, a false witness who speaks lies, and one who sows discord among the brethren. You realize that 3 of those things that are abomination to God are our words. And I'll tell you, looking at the word abomination, it is much more than hate. An abomination is something that is disgusting and repulsive to God. That is and the reason why this is because these things are against his character and everything that he stands for. Remember in verse 18, let's see, verse 17, when I typed this, I had the thing down and I got the symbols instead of the numbers. It's just funny. And I just now caught it. A lying tongue. We live in a society that lying is normal, especially the little white lies. In fact, it's even expected. It's common. We see it in business all the time. The car salesman, not always truthful. The marketing companies, the telemarketers, you just can't trust them. And especially right now, even more the politicians. What's interesting, though, is that everyone expects it and goes right along with it. But it's important for us to remember that the source of lying is Satan the devil. You might want to write down John 8, verse 44. The concept of deceit was introduced in the Garden of Eden by Satan. Just the opposite of what God expects of us. Because all we do should be in total honesty, purity of heart, and truth. In verse 19, it says, a false witness who speaks lies, and one who sows discord among the brethren. In Strong's, the word for sow here is shalith. It means to send away, let go, to shoot forth. To shoot forth sounds like an archer shooting an arrow. And the term, you could say then, they shoot out with an arrow. The word, by the way, the other part for discord means to, there we are, means to create strife, conflict, trouble, or even rivalry. So like an arrow being shot, you can't pull it back. In fact, a term that we use today often is shooting off the mouth. Fits it very, very well here because this term means to speak without discretion, to speak boastfully, loudly, especially about sensitive topics or information. Years ago, I knew someone that loved to start arguments. Whether it be about sports, politics, whatever it might be, he would start an argument, and then he loved to sit back and watch it spread. He literally enjoyed it. And this fits very closely with verse 18. So sowing discord goes hand in hand with talebearing and gossip. Turn to Leviticus chapter 19 and verse 16. Leviticus 19 and verse 16. You shall not go about as a talebearer among your people. This verse begins just like many of the verses in the Ten Commandments. You shall not murder. You shall not steal. You shall not commit adultery. The wording is the same. So talebearing, or gossip is the same type of evil communication contained in the ninth commandment. We should not bear witness against our neighbor. So gossip is relating to something said untrue about another person. They can say falsehoods, information of whatever type, by whatever means, about another person. The Hebrew word for talebearer is Rakel, R-A-K-I-L. And we see this word also in Proverbs in several verses. Proverbs 11, verse 13. A talebearer reveals secrets, but he who is of a faithful spirit conceals a matter. So what a talebearer does, a gossip, they reveal secrets. They tell something that is privileged, that maybe should not be related to anyone else. Proverbs 16:28, using the Darby translation, a false man sows the contention, and a talebearer separates very friends. Again, we're talking here about sowing discord. Proverbs 18, verse 8. The words of a talebearer are as a wound. The words of a talebearer are as wounds, and they go down into the innermost parts of the belly. Again, when we reveal secrets, when we talk about someone, do we really know the pain that we may be causing? The pain caused by talebearers goes right back to my introduction. For some, the pain may never go away, creating those invisible scars that they carry a lifetime. The trouble with a gossip is, it is important to them that you know that they know something that others may not know. Think about it. Regardless, in the process, that they wound or hurt the reputation of that person they gossip about. So, we should ask ourselves, why are we repeating something that we have heard? What is your motive? Most of the time, it's to make someone look bad and you look good. When was the last time you ever heard someone say, hey, I got to tell you something about so-and-so? That person is amazing. He's wonderful. You cannot realize how great a righteous person they are. That's not what a gossip does. Just the opposite. I find it interesting also that most of the time, the person spreading gossip, if the words that they speak have no impact on their lives or the person that they are telling. So we always need to consider the motive on what we are saying and why we are sharing it. Because oftentimes, the things that we say are bringing out faults and feelings of other people and not praising them. And it's very easy to fall into this trap. We have all done it. I have done it. And that's one of the reasons I started in James 3. We all stumble in many things. We're not perfect. But God wants us to work on these things, to consider these things. We must always remember how easy it is to damage the reputation or destroy a person's character. The last thing we should ever want is to be a stumbling block. We know the consequences of that. Brethren, we must guard our tongues because it is so easy to speak harshly and negatively. Again, especially with children. And guard our words from lying, sowing discord, talebearing, and gossip, because these words hurt, they tear down, and they distract from God's love. I found an interesting quote by Gus Diamanto. He was a gentleman that trained Mike Tyson. But I really like this little quote I found. It says, emotions, particularly Emotions, particularly anger, are like fire. They can cook you food and keep you warm, or they can burn your house down. We want to be the ones that edify, warm the belly, and build up, and be uplifting. Talebearing and gossips feed contention and provoke conflict the same way it feeds a fire, the same way wood feeds a fire. We know that it doesn't take much to get a fire started. I was thinking about, now some of you may not know this, a few people have asked, but this reminds me of Mrs. O'Leary's cow. Now, you may not remember, but there was the Great Fire of Chicago from 1871. And the story supposedly is that Mrs. Leary went out to the barn to milk her cow. And during the course of milking that cow knocked over the lamp. And then the barn caught on fire, and it began to spread. And that single, seemingly little incident started a blaze that turned into a disaster. Over a 3-day period of time, Chicago burned, killing approximately 300 people, destroyed roughly 3.3 square miles, including 17,000 structures, and left 100,000 residents homeless. You see, a little fire can grow. How often a little piece of information, a half-truth, a rumor quickly grow. And then it becomes exaggerated and distorted as it's passed from one person to another. And after a while, that fire is out of control and destructive. Words matter. Words have power. And they can do more damage than we ever imagine. But on the other hand, the scriptures has a lot to say about helpful words and what we should be saying. There are many scriptures that emphasize the importance of using our words wisely. When our speech is caring and loving, supportive, helpful, it can be very beneficial both to the hearer and the speaker. When our words are uplifting, they can bond us together. And then they will elevate, encourage, and be a strength to one another. Proverbs 25, verse 11 says, "A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in settings of silver." So the right words at the right time can simply be beautiful and are invaluable. Is our speech helpful? Does our speech reflect God's love and his character, or does it distract from his purpose? Now, Paul has a lot to say on the subject. Please turn to, I believe this is Ephesians. I didn't write down the chapter and verse, but I will start with verse 25. I think it's chapter 4. "Therefore, putting away lying, let each of us speak truth with our neighbor, for we are members of one another." Verse 29, "Let no corrupt word proceed out of your mouth, but what is good for necessary edification, that it may impact grace to the hearers. And do not grieve the Holy Spirit of God, by whom you were sealed for the day of redemption. Let all bitterness, wrath, anger, clamor, and evil speaking be put away from you with all malice. And be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God in Christ forgave you." We must speak truth so that we will not injure through our lies, through our gossip. To be like Christ is to be tender-hearted and always ready to forgive and letting go of bitterness. It said there in verse 29, "What is good for necessary edification." as I said earlier, a gossip normally never edifies. They only take away. Proverbs 26, verse 20, it says, where there is no wood, the fire goes out. And where there is no talebearer, strife ceases. So we have the control. We have the ability to put out the fires before they even start by what we say and how we conduct ourselves. Our words, are they helpful or are they harmful? And are we working to refine our speech through our relationship with Jesus Christ? There's a musical from the 1960s called My Fair Lady. Some of you will remember this. Some of you have no idea what I'm talking about. But it's a story that centers on Professor Henry Higgins, played by Rex Harrison. And the professor is an expert in speech, and he attempts to reform Eliza Doolittle. She's a flower girl with a strong Cockney accent, that's British, played by Audrey Hepburn. And his job is to refine her and teach her how to speak properly. And by the end of the movie, he has. And Eliza becomes refined. And the movie highlights how language can influence one's social status and the opportunities that they have. Brethren, we have the opportunity to refine our speech as we read and learn from the greatest communicator that has ever lived, Jesus Christ. As we read the Gospels, we learn from Jesus Christ how to live our lives, how to speak, how to refine our words. There's so much we can learn from our Bible study and our relationship with Jesus Christ that will help us to evaluate the words that we speak. There's a few points here that I'll just go through. Number one, Christ always said the right thing at the right time. There were times Christ said nothing. Sometimes no response or comment was the wisest thing to do. You might want to write down Proverbs 10, verse 19. Sin is not ended by multiplying words, but the prudent hold their tongues. Jesus Christ teaches us that there will be times that strong speech is necessary, but always should be done with measure and with love. Jesus Christ teaches always to speak in love and always the truth. He teaches us to speak with kindness and encouragement, words that uplift and encourage others, that we may mirror God's love and compassion. He teaches us to practice forgiveness. When we speak words of forgiveness, we reflect God's mercy and grace. He teaches us always to be humble. Speaking words that acknowledge the worth of others and to consider them more than ourselves, that's the attitude that we should have. Not tear down, but to build up. And again, he teaches us to express love and patience. As representatives of Christ, we must continually learn to refine our speech. And we do this by cultivating humility, courtesy, and kindness toward others. I want to speak about a few words that Christ spoke. Please turn to Matthew 12. Matthew 12. Verse 33. Either make the tree good and its fruit good, or else make the tree bad and its fruit bad. For a tree is known by its fruit. Brood of vipers, how can you, being evil, speak good things? For out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. A good man out of the good treasure of his heart brings forth good things. And an evil man out of the evil treasures bring forth evil things. But I say to you that for every idle word men may speak, they will give an account of it in the day of judgment. For by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. Those are words of Christ, and they're tough. I mean, I read how many words that we speak per year. It was in the 100,000s. And, if we're going to stand in judgment, according to simply the words that we speak through our life, and not taking into account the deeds that we may do, but simply the words that you have spoken, how will you be judged? What portrait of Christ do your words paint for others? Will your speech reflect God's love and his character? Or does your speech reflect harshness? Do you speak rashly? Are you quick to criticize and judge others? Do our words embarrass, hurt, ridicule, humiliate others? Or is your speech seasoned with grace and truth? If a person's on God's side, then he will produce godlike fruit. And if he's on the Satan side, he will produce Satan's fruit. It's easy to tell the difference. And when we're led by the Spirit, he will help us in how to respond to every person. When we speak kindly, truthfully, lovingly, it shows that our heart is aligned with God's values. I just want to note a few verses real quick. Proverbs 10, verse 19 says, Sin is not ended by multiplying words, but the prudent holds their tongue. Proverbs 15, verse 4, A soothing tongue is a tree of life, but a perverse tongue crushes the spirit. Proverbs 12, verse 18, There is one who speaks like the piercings of a sword, but the tongue of the wise promote health. Colossians, verse 6. Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, that you may know how you ought to answer each other. And then Proverbs chapter 8, and verse 6 and 7. Listen for what I speak of excellent things, and from the opening of my lips will come right things. From my mouth will speak truth, and the words of my mouth are with righteousness. Nothing crooked or perverse in them. They are all plain to him who understands, and right to those who find knowledge. God wants us to speak excellent things, speak truth, and for our speech to be righteous. I want to finish up with David. Please turn to Psalms 141. Seems like I always end up with David somehow, which is not a bad thing. Psalms 141, verses 1 through 3. Lord, I cry out to you. Make haste to me. Give ear to my voice when I cry out to you. Let my prayer be set before you as incense, the lifting up of my hands as the evening sacrifice. Verse number 3. Set a guard, O Lord, over my mouth. Keep watch over the door of my lips. You ever wonder why David is so special? It shows David as a man of tender conscience, with a tender heart, who asked God to deal with his own sins and his weaknesses before addressing any wicked men that he may fought against. The writers believe that this psalm was written while he was on the run from King Saul, who was trying to kill him. But it shows, even then, that David was more concerned about controlling his speech and attitude than any concern that he was being hunted down by that king. Psalms 19, verse 14 goes hand in hand with this verse. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my strength and redeemer. Just like David, this should be a part of our daily prayer, to ask him to help us set a watch to what we say, to overcome all those things that may have a tendency to come out of our mouths that aren't good. Because it is important to God that we recognize these things, because, again, they reflect something much, much deeper. When we do an honest self-examination, do we have a godly attitude? Is it pleasing to God? Because how we speak honors God. And how we nurture, and this is how we nurture a closer relationship with him. Brethren, listen to yourselves. What comes out of your mouth? Let us never underestimate the importance of our words. Our words matter. Harmful, or are they helpful? And let us have the same prayer as David. Ask God, keep watch over the doors of my lips.